Welcome back to Romania from the beautiful city of Sibiu in the fabled region of Transylvania. Sibiu is ideally situated in a small valley. They call it a depression here, boxed in on three sides by mountains. For outdoor lovers, it's a stepping off point for trekking in spring and summer and snow skiing in the winter, as well as a place from which to explore mysterious Transylvanian castles. But the attraction here is the city itself, famous for its history, culture, architecture, food scene, and is home to several prestigious universities. About 25,000 of the city's residents, of the 134,000 overall, are students. This is a classic, well-preserved medieval town that goes back to the year 1147. And while it's distinctively Romanian, it has origins that might surprise you. Sibiu was founded by so-called Transylvanian Saxons, in other words, Germans, who were brought here in the 12th century as part of a great eastward migration. In fact, it was originally called Hammerstadt in German, pronounced slightly differently in the Transylvanian Saxon dialect that's closely related to Luxembourgish, the tongue from which the dialect descended. After the Second World War and on up through the 1990s, which is to say through 4 decades of communist rule, including the Ceausescu dictatorship, many of the Saxons immigrated to Germany and Austria, but their long presence here has left its stamp on this beautiful city, as it has in other parts of Transylvania. Sibiu is often referred to as the town of eyes, which on first impression might seem a little spooky, given that this is Transylvania with all of its Dracula lore. But there's really nothing spooky about it. The slogan comes from the iconic buildings here with windows opening from sloping roofs. As you can imagine, a legend grew up around these eyes, so to speak. They were meant to frighten people by making them feel like they were being watched. Because the real purpose is something different. They're meant to provide ventilation for the house's attics. Almost the entirety of the old city here is pedestrian only. And it just makes me think as I walk these very peaceful streets, how much I don't miss cars for one thing, but also it seems that when you do enter areas where there are cars outside the centers of these old European cities, they really annoy you more than usual. I guess that's part of the process of being spoiled, by being able to walk up and down streets, cobbled streets, by the way, without the noise, the honking of horns, or just the passing of cars. Although there are a few, like this one, coming up behind me, but that's undoubtedly a merchant who has a special permit to be in the area. But there's nothing like what you would call traffic here, except foot traffic. I've come to maybe one of the most iconic structures in Sibiu, that is Council Tower. Although it's been reconstructed several times, its bones go back to the year 1324, and you can see it from just about anywhere in town. I've come here to climb the spiral staircase to the top for what's supposed to be one of the better views here. Well, I bought my ticket for 2 lei. It's about 42 cents, I think, US. There's something like 148 steps to the top. Just looking up, I see what the drill is. It's actually kind of a relief because it's evidently not completely a spiral staircase. This tower has been used for a variety of purposes down through the centuries. I've read that early on it was a granary, and later it became an observation deck to guard against fires. At one point, the police used it as a, or at least the lower portion of it, as a kind of precinct station and housed temporary prisoners here. For a time in the 1700s, I'm told, it was even a museum of natural sciences, if you can believe that. I've arrived on the 6th level, and what's here is the so-called clock organism, which has been around, I'm sure through some repairs, but it's been around since 1494. Let's take a closer look at it. Well, it looks pretty simple in one sense, but for 6th century old technology, it's got some staying power. So let's go up to the observation deck, the final level. And here we are. And I can see already that the views from here are spectacular. There are flies on the outside of these closed windows. They desperately want to get in. I would really like to be able to open one of these windows, which is impossible. The breeze would be fantastic from here, but it's not to be. Well, I'm starting a long trek down, and I must say I'm rather surprised that there aren't more people here in the tower. There are plenty of tourists here, but it doesn't seem crowded. There's lots of space to share, and people come here, don't make a lot of noise. It's sort of a quiet place. As I said, not overrun with people. It's a fun thing to do, to come, and of course well worth it to get a fantastic view of the city from above. In many ways, Sibiu has a cultural reputation that's far in excess of its size. It has one of the nation's leading theater companies that's been around since 1787. It was in that same year that the city's concert hall was built, and it's still home to Sibiu's Philharmonic Orchestra. And the annual Sibiu International Theater Festival has become the largest performance arts festival in the world. It's very quiet here, especially in the mornings. People do not rise early in the old city. In fact, many of the restaurants don't begin serving breakfast until 10 a.m. But it's still a very pleasurable place to walk around before lots of people start showing up on the squares. I'm in the heart of Sibiu, in the largest of the three principal plazas. The square has been around since at least 1411, when it was mentioned first as being the town's grain market. The fortifications were built around the town. The square eventually became the center of the citadel. The imposing building you see behind me is one you may want to check out if you come to Sibiu. That's the so-called Brukenthal Palace, established in the 1700s by the man who became governor of Transylvania, and which has been a museum since the early 1800s, established from his original collections of art and antique pieces. Today it's part of a multi-campus complex that constitutes the Brukenthal National Museum. I'm in the small Hewitt Square, which in the medieval heyday of Sibiu was the main square of the town, the most important square of the town, at least in the early days, with some of the buildings here dating to the 1300s. But while this square may be small, there's one imposing building here that's a must-see when you come to this city. And set at an angle within this square is the grand Gothic-style Lutheran Cathedral of St. Mary, which has been here since the 1300s. What's of particular interest about this church is its steeple, which is not only 73 meters tall, but is one of the main landmarks of Sibiu. The four turrets that you see atop the steeple weren't placed there purely for architectural reasons. They were said to be a sign to let foreigners back in the day know that the town had the right to carry out the death penalty. Transylvania is nothing if not about legends. There's a slew of them involving Count Dracula alone. But I'm approaching ground zero for urban legend, if you will, here in Sibiu. And that is the Bridge of Lies. It's a bridge. It was built in the 1850s over, coincidentally, the street where my apartment is located, Strada Okne, to connect the town's squares. And it is rife with legend. One legend has it that the bridge would collapse if you told a lie on it, or that young lovers would falsely claim their undying love from this bridge would have an unsuccessful match, or that crooked merchants often crossed over this bridge. The bottom line is that it came to be called the Bridge of Lies through a corruption of its original German name, which literally meant a bridge where a person could lie down, as in rest. Just don't tell that to the many gullible tourists who come here. And around every corner, it seems, there's a surprise, architecturally and otherwise, like the one I've just walked up upon. Steps down to the so-called lower part of the town. I was down here yesterday, not at this particular spot, but enough to see that the lower section of the town is no less charming than the upper section, with shops, restaurants, cafes, coffee bars, and of course lots of old houses with eyes. One interesting phenomenon about being in the lower section of Sibiu is that you get a better perspective on the upper section, where most of the plazas and the steeple churches are. And of course they look much more impressive from down below because they pop off the top of those hills. Around almost every corner, it seems, there are little park-like, I guess you would call them parklets, often involving a fountain, benches, a place for people to sit in a shaded area, all of which makes Sibiu a seemingly very desirable place to live. If you come to Transylvania, and most people go to Brasov when they do, you can easily make a day trip to Sibiu from Brasov. It's about a 2-hour, 40-minute bus ride. I, of course, have come from the west, from Timișoara, and so I'm on my way to Brasov, which is where I hope to see you in the next video.